At 5:37 in the morning, the world is usually silent, but my personal dashboard was screaming in bright red. A critical deployment failure banner glowed against the dark room, signaling that our entire infrastructure was buckling under its own weight. My phone buzzed on the nightstand with yet another frantic call from the operations team, but I did not answer. After 12 long years of keeping this company afloat from the shadows, I had learned one absolute truth: never handle a crisis before consuming caffeine. For over a decade, I was the invisible force ensuring our quarterly financial reports did not vanish into a digital void. I was the person who prevented sleep-deprived product managers from tanking compliance deadlines by scheduling massive system updates on federal holidays. In executive meetings, leadership corporate speak safely labeled me as the backbone of operations, but that title was always delivered with a passive-aggressive tone. They relied on me completely, yet they deeply resented that dependency. The reality was simple. Not a single system in that entire multi-billion-dollar enterprise could function without the automated scheduler I had built from scratch. Back in the early days, before anyone understood how vital automation would become, I hand-coded the script that ran everything. I did not just deploy routine code. I designed the actual digital heartbeat of the firm. Like most heartbeats, nobody ever noticed its existence until it skipped a beat. The newer executives had absolutely no idea how deep my roots ran in that infrastructure. To them, I was just an outdated engineer who simply knew where the digital bodies were buried. Our newly appointed vice president of product, a smug man named Christopher, barely even glanced in my direction during his first all-hands meeting. He accidentally called me Janet, told me I should start documenting my systems, and suggested we migrate to a real automation suite. I just smiled and quietly noted that his countdown had officially begun. I had long ago mastered the delicate art of being entirely essential while remaining completely invisible. I did not wear expensive power suits. I never delivered lunchtime keynotes. And I certainly did not post self-important think pieces on social media. I simply showed up every morning, quietly patched critical vulnerabilities before they caused damage, and walked out the door at exactly 5:02 in the afternoon. It is significantly easier to run an entire corporate system when nobody realizes you are the system. That was exactly what upper management missed when they passed me over for the lead engineer promotion last year. Instead of rewarding loyalty, they hired a fresh-faced tech import with an expired container tool tattoo and a massive ego. I spent 2 miserable months training him while he condescendingly called my work low-key brilliant and asked me to translate it into modern code. I translated those scripts into a hidden directory labeled Legacy Archive and quietly moved them into deep, cold storage. I never complained or showed an ounce of frustration because raising your voice in a corporate office instantly labels you as difficult. If you say nothing, they assume you lack ambition, so I played the long game instead. I still believed in the illusion of merit back then, foolishly hoping someone would realize the uptime dashboards and payroll triggers were all tethered to my personal login. But nobody asked, blindly assuming everything had been migrated to the cloud because some glossy documentation claimed it was done. The turning point arrived during what was supposed to be a routine 20-minute strategy alignment meeting. Christopher was pitching a massive cost-cutting measure to a Slack channel filled with corporate yes-men, using slides covered in empty buzzwords. His grand plan involved completely eliminating redundancy protocols in our automation systems to save a few pennies. I let him finish his arrogant presentation before speaking up in my usual calm tone, warning him that removing fallback nodes would inevitably stall compliance reporting during data surges. The silence that followed my warning was incredibly thick, as the entire call waited to see how the new vice president would react. Christopher did not flinch. He simply smirked and delivered a line that would immediately become legendary in office folklore. He sent a text at almost midnight stating that I needed to lose the attitude or lose my $200,000 bonus. He typed it with the absolute confidence of a small man who truly believed intimidation equated to real leadership. I did not respond with anger, nor did I threaten to walk out on the spot. I merely typed a single word in reply: copy. It was the clinical response of an operator logging a radio transmission before initiating a controlled shutdown of a massive machine. I set my phone down, opened my terminal, and immediately began backing up my personal activity logs. People consistently underestimate the quiet employees, never realizing that my invisibility was actually the perfect camouflage. Christopher had no clue that the entire automation spine of the enterprise was still running under a single aging credential: mine. Surface-level dashboards gave his teams the polite illusion of visibility, but visibility is absolutely not the same thing as true ownership. I spent the next hour setting strict expiration timestamps on token chains and exporting architecture snapshots to an encrypted external drive. I even highlighted dozens of executive overrides that had quietly failed over to my backup scripts over the last 3 years. One of those automated overrides had recently prevented a $9 million loss in a vendor overpayment cycle, a feat they rewarded with a coffee gift card that ended up bouncing. Christopher truly believed he had issued a terrifying threat, completely unaware that I had already survived 5 previous versions of him. They all had the same haircut, the same sharp jawline, and the same desperate fetish for boardroom theatrics. I closed my laptop and watched the soft blue hum of my monitors reflect off the walls. They had spent a decade relying on my labor, yet the very first time I questioned a terrible technical decision, they dangled my livelihood like a toy. I genuinely hoped Christopher enjoyed his authority because, come sunrise, the systems he claimed to understand would start coughing up fatal error messages. At exactly 2:11 in the morning, I leaned back and verified my master credential chain in the system registry. Line 283 clearly showed my name as the sole administrator with absolute termination control. I smiled a cold smile, realizing the massive house I built had been declared abandoned by corporate squatters who never bothered to check the legal deed. Every single automated deployment, compliance check, and payroll run was propped up by a legacy heartbeat they never decoupled because doing so required actual reading. Now all of those critical operational dependencies were tied to an account belonging to a woman whose hard-earned bonus had just been casually threatened. At 6:03 the next morning, the structural damage began with a tiny, imperceptible hiccup in the system logs. A mission-critical deployment failed to trigger, halting a scheduled compliance script meant to push daily data to our largest European client. Christopher never read the fine print of that contract, meaning he did not know that failing to execute this daily task risked massive legal penalty clauses. By sunrise, the automated payroll system threw a vague red banner announcing it could no longer locate authorization objects. By mid-morning, Slack threads were multiplying exponentially as junior developers frantically realized the system scheduler logs listed the owner field as entirely null. A ghost lock fallback I had coded years ago had activated, completely freezing the deployment pipeline until proper administrative authorization was provided. Urgently marked operational tickets were automatically routed directly to my account, only to instantly bounce back with my newly activated out-of-office response. My message calmly stated that if this was a scheduling issue, they should refer to internal documentation that did not exist. By lunchtime, the minor technical glitches had officially transformed into a full-scale corporate crisis. Finance reported that major automated transfers had failed to clear, and engineering attempts to manually rerun the tasks failed because everything was locked behind my deprecated security tokens. The operations team finally ran a system trace, only to find a massive wall of red text indicating the core scheduler had not been updated in over 400 days. My credentials were the only ones with full administrative right access. The vice president tried to manage the panic by desperately calling the situation an agile stress test during his morning stand-up, but his forced confidence completely vanished when legal demanded answers. Security teams pulling the admin logs discovered a comment I had left in a shell script years ago, stating that if the code still pointed to me, it meant nobody else did their job. Christopher frantically asked HR if they could freeze my access, but they informed him that locking me out would completely destroy any hope of recovery. At exactly 8:01 the following morning, the system completely stopped, calmly refusing to open its digital doors while the entire executive team panicked. Salaries for over 1,000 employees were frozen in mid-execution, and the automated compliance bot failed to dispatch the quarterly audit package. The general counsel went entirely pale during a live call with regulatory auditors when they realized the critical automation was completely tied to my deactivated ID. The head of legal stood up so fast his chair toppled across the floor, demanding to know how a single engineer owned the entire system. DevOps engineers frantically reviewed the code, realizing my automated 48-hour heartbeat check had officially expired, triggering a clean and total cessation of services. It was not a cyber attack or a malicious act of sabotage. It was a digital do not resuscitate order signed by the very person they had consistently ignored and pushed to the margins. By noon, the company was drowning in broken vendor contracts and missed deadlines, forcing the board of directors to step in. A luxury black sedan pulled up outside my quiet townhouse, carrying high-ranking legal counsel, but I did not even bother opening the front door. Instead, I sent a formal restoration agreement directly to the senior legal partner. My terms were completely non-negotiable: the immediate payout of my threatened bonus, a written apology from executive leadership, and a consulting fee of over $1 million up front. The board voted unanimously to accept my terms within an hour, and Christopher was promptly placed on an indefinite leave of absence from which he would never return. I opened my laptop, verified the wire transfer had successfully cleared, and clicked exactly 3 buttons to restore the core scheduler. As the digital heartbeat bloomed back to life, I permanently deleted my credentials from the system, ensuring they could never rely on my ghost again. I did not need revenge. I simply wanted them to finally feel the crushing weight of the silence left behind when true power walks out the door.